Welcome to Your Success Podcast. We give you actionable insight and stories behind real-life success wherever you go. Here are your hosts, Angelos and Mo.
Welcome to Your Success Podcast. I'm Angelos. Today I'm interviewing James Roberts, who was an elite Paralympic athlete for over a decade. He represented Great Britain at countless World Championships and 2 Paralympic Games in Beijing 2008 and London 2012. James was born with a congenital disability called femoral dysplasia and a floating hip of the left leg, as well as scoliosis of the spine, which mustn't have been easy growing up at all. But his story is certainly inspiring, as his disabilities have not stopped him from achieving great success. Welcome, James.
Thank you very much for having me on, Angelos.
It's a real pleasure, mate. So first things first, it can't have been easy growing up with a disability. What were the biggest challenges you had to face?
I wouldn't put them as challenges, more specifically, because I think if we go way back, even to when I was an infant, and even if we go even further back than that, my mother was told, due to the amount of bones I'm missing in my left leg, I shouldn't be able to walk, let alone use a prosthetic limb. But my mother has not told me that until I was probably in my teens. And from a biomechanical standpoint, that's already, everything is already in place. So to kind of come to my point there, Angelos, I think I've always adapted to my environment and never seen things. I know people will say to me, "Oh, that must have been an adverse situation you kind of grew up in," but I didn't. I didn't see it as a hindrance. I just think, well, this is what I've been given, so to speak. Let me adapt the situations so I can be among my peers. So, and the idea that springs to mind is I was in primary school, and sort of being this hearsay now because I don't remember it. My mother said to me, "You were sitting on the side watching friends and peers playing on the monkey bars, but you could see the cogs ticking around in my head. Well, how can I adapt this?" I would call it mundane task now as an adult, but how can I come up with an adaptation so I can be among my friends and be included? And within, say, 2 to 3 days at most, I was there playing alongside them. And it's been kind of my mindset and my mantra from that day on. It's not looking at things from an adverse perspective, but looking, well, how can I adapt it so it will suit me?
So do you think that was a conscious decision by your mum then to say, to not to dwell on it, to not to start putting labels on you and say, James, you've got this and you've got this and you've got this, and these are the limits in your life that you're going to face. You've just gone, well, I'm just like everyone else, I just need to adapt differently, right?
I would definitely agree with that. I'd say you could say some parents that do that is probably giving the child a safety blanket, whereas my mum didn't do that. It's like, well, you don't know what the person is capable of. You kind of take the shackles off. So I think, well, what has he got to lose? I probably was brought up in an age where health and safety is not what it is today. So there is an element of common sense. Well, I'm going to give it a try, give it a crack. And if I can't thus do it from then, after I've tried an adaptation, okay, then it's time to maybe let it fall by the wayside. But it was trying, it's a bit of a trial and error kind of way of thinking. But if you can get something to work in your favor, in which case I've probably been very fortunate enough to be of that mindset, I'm probably going in the right direction to be able to be successful.
Yeah. And you have been very successful. I mean, you've represented GB at countless World Championships and 2 Paralympic Games. You started off as a swimmer, but that hasn't been the only sport you've competed in, has it?
No, far from it. I think, off the top of my head, at national level, swimming was one of 3 sports, the other being rowing and sitting volleyball. But then I transitioned again when I retired 5 years ago to now doing wheelchair basketball. But that is very much more at the domestic level. So I wouldn't even go as far as recreational. It's still an element of competition, but it's one level below.
I mean, to compete in any sport is an amazing thing. But you thought, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, and you're still doing stuff today. So full credit to you. But I guess the question I've got in my mind is, how do you move from, when in your younger years did you decide, you know what, I'm going to start taking this swimming, I'm going to start taking these sports activities seriously, and actually I'm going to take it to a national level and maybe even an international level? I mean, what was that transition in your mind? How did that happen?
I think it happened by accident, Angelos, because if we kind of go back to when I thought I could make it to the international level, I would have been about 15 or 16. One of my coaches, while I was living out in Belgium, approached me and said, "What is your thought about doing disability sport?" And I think, to my surprise, I was taken aback by the comment. It's like, well, I think coming from this from 2 points of view now, I think from one point of view, I was probably very rebellious as being a teenager. It's like, well, why would I want to do that when I can compete with able bodies within reason? But then I think if we go back to the early 2000s, from a media perspective, even in the UK, the Paralympics is not in the media spotlight that it is today. I think personally it's still got a long way to go in terms of being on par with the Olympics, but then that might come down to the difference between the resources between Channel 4 and BBC, but that's a different story altogether. But it's from then I took it on board, the comment, and I think within 6 months it kind of progressed very rapidly. Okay, this is a reality of being a profession. And I think, what would it be, in 2003, I was on the potential team for Great Britain. So it kind of, from going from, I think it would be September, October of 2002, within 6 months you're on the national program. It's like, well, wow.
What was the training like to be considered to be part of the national team?
It's for making a national team, Angelos. It's the training is not, I won't say not important, but they generally look at time criteria by event every 12 months. And I don't think I've looked at it in a few years, but I think back then the event I got selected for nationally was breaststroke, and I hit the time. I was thereabouts. I think I got as high as ninth or 10th in the world, but then that's very judgmental of how you would view the rankings, because some countries won't enter their athletes until a year before the Paralympics and things like that. So it's very like, well, okay, on paper I was there, but would there be somebody that was better than me somewhere out in the world? I would say probably, on reflection nowadays, probably so. But it was a little bit frustrating. We kind of progressed to a year later and the Athens Paralympics. You're thinking, okay, I'm not ranked ninth in the world. The qualifying time to go, but obviously us with GB being very successful in the Paralympic movement, we also have another qualifying time as well, which will be slightly faster. So it's like, well, I didn't get selected. I think it was the spurring point to probably want to succeed and make that career, and kind of like, well, I've been unfortunate to miss this games. I don't want it to happen 4 years later. So it was very frustrating watching it on television. It's like, well, we didn't enter anybody in the event from Great Britain for my classification. I can understand it now because it's a lot of politics that goes around it on selection. You could, in a sense, make the qualifying time nationally and still not get selected. So it's that cutthroat in the sports of swimming, cycling, and athletics. It's if you're not probably going to make a final, or even in worst case scenarios going to medal, you sometimes won't you will sometimes get selected if you're an older athlete. I think the younger generation, be it, I don't know, say 15, 16 upwards, they'll maybe make an allowance for that and send you to a games from a developmental standpoint, for you get the experience and get to see the difference between a Paralympics to say a World Championships, which is probably a golf.
Okay, so you talked of medals and that being like the top tier, should we say, in any Olympics, right? But most of the time people just see the finished product of success. What are your views on this? How easy is it to remain confident in what you do? Because we all experience down days. How do you overcome those down days and get back onto top form again?
I think it's how you view motivation. I think it's very much, using a PE analogy, whether you see it from an intrinsic point of view or an extrinsic point of view. I think as an athlete, I think sometimes in that 10-year period, I used a very extrinsic motivation to probably bring out the best in me, and definitely from the low points, because I think you do get. I don't think I ever got complacent, but you kind of rest on your laurels sometimes, and thinking, well, and the actual idea that springs to mind. One of my competitors was on a documentary that Matthew Pinson presented, and his goal was to make the Paralympics in Beijing in 2008 after he'd been blown up. I think it was either Iraq or Afghanistan, but my memory I can't remember the exact one. But that was kind of a light bulb moment for me. It's like, well, I'm going to have a say in if you're going to get selected or not. And that was kind of, it reignited the fire. It's like, well, I've never been to a Paralympics. In no uncertain terms that you'll be standing my way. But it was quite, not frustrating, but it was the fire that kind of lit under me. It's like, well, I need to kind of pull my finger out a little bit more here. I've made 2 World Championships by then. It's like, well, you don't want to fall at the last hurdle and not make the Paralympics. So to kind of come to my point, Angelos, with that one, is like, well, they made this documentary of the person and he didn't make it past the first trial. So it's like, well, you've made all that hoopla about this individual. And I think they wanted to get more military into the movement itself. It's like, well, if it was that easy to go from being an able-bodied individual to go into the Paralympics, you could have the ideology. There might be some truth in this, that the Chinese do it. They seem to be near perfect disabilities. You're thinking, well, how are you churning out this many individuals with the perfect disability that they kind of fit at the top end of their classification? But I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy for somebody to want to mutilate their body like that. But it's like, it's not easy to make the Paralympics. Okay, I would say a little bit. It's probably easier, a little more so than the Olympics. But I think as time is progressing, the other nations, be it the Eastern Bloc, the Asian countries, are putting more money into Paralympic sport, the harder it's going to get. I think I envision probably Great Britain. I think there's only, since I've been competing at a high level, I think there's 1 games that we haven't finished in the top 2. But we're already a small population as it is. If you count everybody together and then you probably just account for the disability, that's going to come down. So I see us probably starting to slip down the medal table just because we haven't got the resources of individuals to be able to put a strong, well, not a strong team, but be able to get the number of athletes that, say, the bigger countries, say the US, the Chinese, the Russians, are able to do, because they already have a bigger population to start with.
Yeah. I mean, we've interviewed Mark Ormrod before, who is a triple amputee, and he's doing some great stuff, promoting, just helping Royal Marines who have experienced terrible injuries. And I think he's down in Australia at the moment, training for the Invictus Games. Do you think the country is now more accepting of the Paralympic Games compared to a few years ago, and treat it as almost well, the same as the traditional Olympics? Do you think there's more of an acceptance now?
I would definitely say so, and I think it helped that it in essence was coming home in 2012 because, well, okay, it was a German that invented the Paralympic movement, but it was invented in Stoke Mandeville. So I think the element of it being historically coming home after, what would it have been, 64 years of a mass, serves me right. I think the British public got behind it from that standpoint, but also from a more negative standpoint now. I think some people may have got Paralympic tickets in the first instance because they weren't able to get the Olympic tickets. But then on reflection from that, I think that lull between the Olympics and the Paralympics kind of set a fire under the British public. It's like, oh, we're loving this sporting summer. Oh, come on, this lull period needs to hurry up, and they got behind it because I was asked by, be it friends, students I'd gone to university with, and say, how easy would it be to get a ticket for the Paralympics? Thinking, I think quite easily, but that going on past experience with China, where there's empty stadiums, same the case with Rio 4 years later in 2016, I think I was maybe a little bit pessimistic. It's like, well, because my sport, instant volleyball, was not that popular in the UK, so we were used to playing in front of, I said, at most, say, probably 20, 25 people, and a lot of those would be friends and family. So you're thinking, we're in a 10,000-seater venue. Well, okay, maybe 1,000 maybe show up at best. But I was shocked and amazed when we first come out of the first game, sold out. And I think to put it into reflection and kind of how it actually was, I think every game, be it the men's team or the women played, the venue was sold out. The venue wasn't even sold out for the gold medal match. So you're thinking, well, that's how, you could say, patriotic the nation got behind their team. It didn't matter if you were odds on to win a gold medal. Okay, you might be unfortunate to get silver or bronze, or you were a long shot like we were. They were going to get behind the country.
Yeah, I remember it was really great to see the fact that it was treated equally, and everyone just got behind it because it was Team GB. So that was a really great thing. Now, you've created something called Fit Amputee. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how it can help people?
Well, Angelos, it's probably a two-pronged answer I'm going to give you now. It's a bit of a play on words to, obviously, my humble beginnings as an athlete, so I'm playing on the words that, obviously, I've got a disability myself. It's to help both people with amputations, be it congenital or who've attained it through an accident, trauma, or whatever that may be. But also I will work with able-bodied individuals as well if the story resonates with them. So in essence, it's my online presence as an online personal trainer.
That's not too bad at all. I mean, I have had a look at it. It is really quite interesting, the great stuff that you do there. So, James, we ask every person this, but I mean, I'm especially curious what your answer is, considering that you have represented your country. What does success mean to you?
Well, probably when I was an athlete, it would probably be that elusive gold medal I do not have. That would probably be defined me as an athlete. But how I would perceive success now is you are trying to attain a goal that you were setting out to do, which when I was younger was to make it to the elite level. So in essence, I succeeded in being able to do that. Okay, I didn't attain the goal, the top of the pyramid, but I got pretty damn well close. So I would say it's definitely looking at success as more of trying to aspire to a goal as opposed to probably my outlook on it as an athlete, where I was probably trying to attain perfection.
So if ever you write a book, James, I think you should call it From Monkey Bars to Representing Great Britain. I think that would be a good title. Great. So I really like that definition, because success isn't a final destination, it's a continuous journey, and I really like that. So thank you for joining us today, James. How do people get in contact with you?
You can find me on the easiest ones on social media would be either Twitter, which is at James O. Roberts 11. It's the same for Instagram. The website is FIT, so it's FITAMPUTEE.co.uk.
Amputee.co.uk. That's absolutely brilliant. So thank you once again, James, for joining me today. It's been a really great privilege to listen to your story.
It's been my pleasure and honor, Angelos.
Cool. So we want to know your thoughts on James's inspirational story as well. So email us on hello@yoursuccesspodcast.com or get in touch on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thanks for listening to Your Success Podcast. Please click subscribe, leave us a review. We look forward to your comments on our Facebook and YouTube channels. And don't forget to subscribe to our book. You can find it at tiny.cc/yourbook, the #1 best-selling Amazon book. So I've been Angelos, and see you again on the next exciting episode of Your Success Podcast.
You have been listening to Your Success Podcast. Click subscribe for more incredible content. More details can be found at www.yoursuccesspodcast.com.